I want you to try and imagine waking up tomorrow morning in a world where the concept of a book, like as we know it, simply doesn't exist.
Yeah, that is a staggering mental image to start with.
Right. I mean, you open your eyes, and there are no paperbacks on your nightstand. There are no printed labels on your coffee bag.
Nothing at all.
And then, as you walk outside, there are no newspapers, no magazines, no billboards. But it actually goes so much deeper than just missing paper.
Oh, absolutely. It's structural.
Exactly. Because in this reality, science has been completely painfully stagnant for centuries. Your smartphone, the internet, modern medicine, I mean, even the electric light bulb.
Yeah.
None of these things were ever invented.
Which means you're basically looking at a version of 2026 where humanity is still, effectively trapped in an agrarian feudal society.
Right, like traveling by horse.
Traveling by horse and sail, exactly. And the reason for this massive developmental delay, it all comes down to a single point of failure in our history.
And that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring one of the most consequential what-if scenarios found in our historical sources.
It's a huge one.
We're looking at what happens if Johannes Gutenberg basically fails to invent the printing press in the 1450s. Like, what if his experiments with movable type just, didn't work out?
Or maybe he just ran out of funding, right?
Exactly. And humanity just didn't figure out mechanical printing for another, 300 or 400 years. I absolutely love this kind of massive aha moment, so I am thrilled to get into this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thought experiment. But to really grasp the catastrophe of that alternate timeline, we first have to establish the baseline reality of the mid-1400s.
Okay, let's unpack this.
We have to look at how grueling it was to move a single idea from one human mind to another before Gutenberg's machine even existed.
Right, because the sources paint this picture of an era where knowledge was just entirely bottlenecked by human hands.
Yes, completely bottlenecked.
If you wanted a copy of a book, say, a text on geometry or like a collection of philosophy, a professional scribe had to literally sit down and copy it.
Word for word.
Word for word.
By hand. And, that process required just an agonizing amount of time. Like, a standard manuscript could take a scribe several months of daily labor.
Just for one copy.
Just for one. And a highly illuminated complex text or a large Bible could take years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then when you factor in the cost of the labor, plus the physical materials, which was often vellum, meaning, you needed the skins of hundreds of sheep or calves just to make the pages.
Wait, really? Hundreds of sheep for one book?
Yeah, the economics of information were entirely different.
It makes a book the equivalent of, like, a modern super yacht.
That's a great way to put it.
Just a massive, bespoke luxury item.
Exactly. Only kings, the highest tier of the nobility, elite monasteries, and maybe a handful of early universities could even dream of owning them. For the average person, books were essentially mythical objects. I mean, you could live your entire life from birth to death and never once touch a page of written text.
The scale of that information scarcity is just hard to wrap your head around today. The sources actually note that a monastery might spend decades copying and compiling a single theological collection.
Decades, yeah.
And the greatest libraries on the planet, like the absolute epicenters of human learning, they held fewer total words than what your smartphone downloads in the background while you're brushing your teeth.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And because information was moving strictly at the speed of handwriting, what's fascinating here is that it fundamentally altered the nature of truth itself.
How so?
Well, when every single copy of a text is produced by a tired human being, working by candlelight, errors are just mathematically inevitable.
I see.
A scribe skips a line or misspells a word or decides to, quote-unquote, correct something they think is wrong.
So humanity essentially had no version control for reality?
Exactly. No version control.
It's like playing a multi-generational game of telephone, but each whisper takes a year. And if a monk misreads a geographical coordinate or a medical recipe, that mistake gets baked in.
And becomes historical fact for the next century.
Which makes me think, if every book is a unique, hand-copied luxury item, doesn't that mean, quote-unquote, truth is basically just whatever the richest guy in town says it is?
That is exactly what it means. Without identical copies of texts to serve as a baseline, truth fragments, there is no master reference point.
Right.
So knowledge becomes incredibly localized. Like what is considered a scientific or historical fact in Paris might be entirely different from the accepted fact in Rome.
Just because their texts diverged 50 years ago.
Precisely. So errors multiply, rumors replace facts, and the elite retain total control.
Which means Gutenberg essentially invented the save as PDF function for human knowledge.
I love that.
He
Yes.
created a way to lock a thought in place so it couldn't be corrupted by 1,000 tiny transcription errors. But in our alternate timeline where Gutenberg fails, that lock never happens.
No, it doesn't.
And the elite retain their total monopoly over these rare mutating texts, which brings us to the first massive casualty of this timeline, right? The suppression of revolutionary ideas.
Yeah, because if you want to challenge an entrenched power structure, you need bandwidth.
Right.
You need to be able to synchronize the thoughts of thousands of people at once.
And there's no clearer historical example of that than Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation.
Absolutely.
Because in our actual timeline, Luther challenged the Catholic Church in 1517. But his ideas didn't just stay pinned to a church door in Wittenberg, they went viral.
Very viral. Printers recognized the explosive demand for his arguments, and they reproduced thousands of his pamphlets within weeks.
Which allowed Luther to basically bypass the local institutional gatekeepers.
Exactly. The church couldn't simply confiscate his one handwritten manuscript and silence him.
Because there were suddenly 10,000 copies circulating across Europe.
Right, but without the printing press.
Luther is just, a local priest with a grievance.
Yeah.
The sources point out that his writings would have to be copied by hand. Maybe a few sympathetic scholars read them. But the church authorities would just easily intercept the few physical copies in existence.
And the Reformation would just fizzle out before it ever gained the momentum of a movement.
Wow.
The religious monopoly remains intact across Europe. And without that initial fracturing of religious authority, the subsequent centuries of political and philosophical debates, regarding individual rights and freedoms are severely delayed.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The delay in religious and political thought is massive. But I think the impact on science is even more terrifying.
Oh, definitely. The scientific revolution basically hits a brick wall.
Because, as you pointed out with the version control concept, science requires an objective shared baseline.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, science is fundamentally cumulative. It is a collaborative process across time and geography.
Yep.
Think about how planetary motion was understood in our timeline. Nicholas Copernicus publishes his heliocentric model. Then Johannes Kepler reads that exact, standardized text and refines the mathematics of planetary orbits.
Okay.
Galilei reads Kepler, observes the heavens, publishes his findings, and then Isaac Newton reads all of them and unites physics under universal laws.
They were literally standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
But they could only do that because they were all reading the exact same books. So without mass printing, how do these brilliant minds communicate?
They don't. At least not reliably. In a world of hand-copied texts, Kepler might receive a version of Copernicus's data that has transcription errors in the astronomical tables.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he spends his entire life trying to mathematically prove a flawed data set.
Or worse, he never gets the data at all. The source material actually emphasizes how incredibly isolated researchers were before print. In our alternate timeline, scientists are endlessly repeating the exact same experiments in different countries because they have absolutely no idea that someone else already solved the problem.
It just reduces scientific discovery to a series of isolated sparks that never catch fire.
Imagine having the brilliant idea for a life-saving vaccine, but you can only tell your immediate neighbor and then it's forgotten. The shoulders of giants effect just vanishes.
That's spot on. A brilliant thinker might discover a principle of chemistry or the mechanism of a disease, but if they can only share it through handwritten letters to a few peers, that knowledge often dies with them.
So medicine, vaccines, electricity, industrial chemistry, they all advance at a painful crawl.
The cumulative engine of science, where every generation starts precisely where the last one left off, it just never starts running.
The human cost of that lost knowledge is staggering.
It really is. Yeah. And that inability to share abstract scientific concepts translates directly into a failure to share practical physical advancements, too.
Right, the physical world stays smaller and it stays slower.
Yeah, let's look at the Renaissance.
Yeah.
We think of the Renaissance as this explosion of art and culture and engineering.
Yeah, definitely.
But that explosion was fueled by the rediscovery and, critically, the mass distribution of ancient Greek and Roman texts. Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, Archimedes.
Suddenly, thousands of artists and scholars were reading them simultaneously.
Right. But in our alternate timeline, Those foundational texts remain locked away in monastic archives.
So a monk in a remote abbey might have a copy of Archimedes, but he isn't sharing it with an engineer in Florence.
Exactly. The intellectual fuel of the Renaissance is severely rationed.
The sources even mention how Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks, which contain these centuries ahead of their time ideas on anatomy and engineering, they stayed entirely private because they weren't printed.
Yeah, they were just hidden away.
Now imagine if every great thinker's work suffered that same fate. Michelangelo's techniques, Brunelleschi's architectural formulas, they are limited strictly to their immediate physical apprentices.
And this isolation heavily impacts global exploration as well. Safe navigation depends entirely on accurate, standardized charts.
Right.
When a sea captain in our timeline discovered a new reef or a faster current, that information was sent to a map maker, the copper printing plate was corrected, and every subsequent map carried that new, life-saving data.
But if maps are hand-drawn, one tired scribe's slip of the pen puts a reef 50 miles in the wrong direction.
And those deadly errors multiply over decades.
So sea captains fiercely hoard their navigation secrets because accurate knowledge is literally priceless.
Right, which means exploration stalls. They become dramatically more dangerous, slowing down global trade and contact between continents by centuries.
But, wait, I want to pause here and challenge one of the broader claims in the source material, specifically regarding the Industrial Revolution.
Okay, go ahead.
I completely get the science and navigation aspects, but humanity has been building massive complex structures for millennia without the printing press.
Sure.
Like, we built the pyramids, we built the Colosseum, the aqueducts. So couldn't a smart apprentice just learn engineering directly from a master? Like, why do we strictly need mass-printed textbooks to build a steam engine or a railroad?
That is a very sharp distinction to draw, actually, and it comes down to the difference between massive labor scaling and precision engineering.
Okay, how so?
Building the pyramids required incredible architectural vision, yes, but the execution relied on raw, brute force labor and masonry techniques that could be demonstrated visually on site.
Right.
The Industrial Revolution operates on entirely different principles. You cannot build a nationwide railroad network or a factory of functioning steam engines through oral tradition.
Because it requires precision across thousands of moving parts.
Exactly. Industrialization requires standardized mathematics. It requires exact metallurgical recipes for steel, mechanical tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter.
Wow.
You need thousands of engineers, mechanics, and metallurgists operating from the exact same mathematical reality.
Yeah.
You can teach one apprentice by hand, but you can't teach 1,000 engineers that way.
Ah, I see. So a master blacksmith can teach an apprentice how to forge a sword by eye, but a master engineer cannot teach 10,000 factory workers how to calculate the pressure threshold of a steam boiler just by talking to them.
Precisely. Building a railroad requires mass technical education. You need textbooks to teach algebra, physics, and thermodynamics to an entire generation of workers simultaneously.
And without printed manuals and standardized equations, mechanical engineering just remains a rare, bespoke craft.
Right, you might get one functional steam engine built by a genius, but you don't get the Industrial Revolution. Factories are pushed back centuries. Humanity remains bound to muscle, wind, and water power.
So what does this all mean? It naturally leads us to the political reality of a world stuck in the agricultural age, doesn't it?
It does.
Because keeping engineering, exploration, and education restricted to a few elites naturally keeps political power consolidated in their hands as well.
Absolutely. Mass communication is the prerequisite for mass mobilization. Modern democracy relies entirely on newspapers.
The sources outline this brilliantly. A newspaper synchronizes outrage.
Yes.
Like if an unjust tax is levied or a government commits an atrocity, a printed newspaper ensures that the citizen in the capital city and the farmer 100 miles away find out about it at the exact same time.
It creates a shared reality. And without that shared reality, governments face virtually zero coordinated public scrutiny.
Because corruption thrives when it operates in the dark.
Right. A local uprising might occur, but it remains isolated because nobody in the next province even knows it's happening.
Without printed news, a revolution is just a local riot. It's like trying to organize a nationwide coordinated protest using only carrier pigeons.
That's a perfect analogy. It fundamentally changes the viability of revolutions. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, these were driven by printed pamphlets.
Yeah, philosophical essays circulated among the middle class, broadsides pasted on tavern walls. Thomas Paine's Common Sense wasn't a speech, it was a mass-printed document.
And without that infrastructure of shared ideas, coordinating a nationwide democratic revolution is logistically impossible. So monarchies and empires survive much longer. Constitutions are delayed.
Kings remain powerful.
Exactly. The very concept of freedom of speech struggles to take root, simply because the average person doesn't have a platform to speak from, or a mechanism to be heard beyond their own village.
This really forces you to think about the human cost of this timeline.
This raises an important question right now. We talk about the delay of machines and governments, but the tragedy is what happens to the individuals.
Yeah.
Think about a world where mass education simply doesn't exist because there are no textbooks. A single teacher can lecture to 30 students in a room, but a single printed textbook can teach 3 million people across a century.
And without those books, millions of people just never learn to read at all. Education is restricted entirely by geography and wealth.
Right. And students who do attend school are forced to memorize texts orally because the school might only own one copy of a primer.
Which means entire professions remain strictly hereditary. You become a farmer because your parents were farmers, and there is no accessible reservoir of knowledge for you to learn anything else.
I want you to consider how much incredible human potential and genius was entirely wasted simply because ordinary people lacked access to learning.
Yeah, how many potential Isaac Newtons or Marie Curies lived and died as illiterate agricultural laborers?
Just because the knowledge they needed to unlock their potential was locked away in a private, hand-copied manuscript 1,000 miles away.
The loss of human capital is incalculable, and because that potential is suppressed for centuries, we never reach the ultimate milestone of shared knowledge.
The digital age.
Exactly. This is the part of the sources that completely shifts how you view our modern world.
It really does.
We tend to view the digital age as a break from the past, as something entirely new. But the information age is fundamentally tethered to the printing age.
The microchip does not exist without the printing press. The technology of Silicon Valley rests on centuries of printed physics, printed chemistry, and printed mathematics.
Programmers need textbooks. Electrical engineers need standardized, peer-reviewed journals.
Right. Without affordable, mass-produced books, there is no electrical engineering. The semiconductor industry never gets off the ground.
There are no computers, no satellites, no smartphones, no AI.
In this alternate timeline, the year 2026 basically looks like our 1700s. People are traveling by horse and sail instead of jets and satellites.
It highlights a beautiful irony about our current reality, actually. The internet, which we so often view as the technology that is rendering print obsolete, is actually the direct descendant of Gutenberg's press.
Yes.
The internet is just a printing press with zero marginal cost and infinite distribution speed.
Which underscores the central thesis of the historical sources we've been examining. Humanity in this alternate 2026 isn't less intelligent than we are today. A human brain in the year 1400 was essentially the same as a human brain today. They just lack the ability to share ideas efficiently. Information remains a luxury rather than a public resource.
Civilizations don't advance simply because individuals become smarter. They advance because ideas spread faster.
Exactly. The friction of sharing ideas is reduced. The printing press took information from being a hoarded, fragile luxury and turned it into a resilient public resource. It provided the scaffolding for human thought.
And without that scaffolding, the modern world simply collapses.
It does.
It is breathtaking when you step back and look at the sheer scope of this deep dive. Gutenberg's machine wasn't just metal type and ink pressing into paper. It was the hidden engine powering the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, democracy, industrialization, and the digital world.
Yeah, every website you visit, every piece of code running your devices, it all traces its roots back to one 15th century workshop in Germany.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today, and this builds on a question posed at the very end of our source material. The sources ask what invention today might be considered equally transformative 500 years from now. But based on everything we've just explored, let's reframe that for you.
I like this.
If Gutenberg's printing press was the ultimate cure for information scarcity, right, it solved the problem of humanity not having enough data to build upon.
Right.
But today, we are drowning in the exact opposite problem. Information overload. Finding the truth in a sea of infinite mass-produced noise is becoming our greatest challenge.
It really is.
So what will be the transformative invention that saves us from this new extreme? Will it be an AI that perfectly curates truth and acts as the new version control for reality? Or will it be something we haven't even dreamed of yet?
That is exactly the kind of structural question we need to be asking.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the invisible foundations of the world around you, and remember what it would truly mean to wake up in a reality where the written word was rarer than gold. We'll see you next time.